The Shadow Dancer, first chapter, the PCH. On a night of a full moon off the Pacific Ocean rim, on a meandering lost highway that seemingly comes and goes from nowhere to nowhere yet, a woman sits at the back seat of a silver pearl Prius, her eyes directed out the window, his eyes directed right onto her. All feels very Hitchcockian. All feels very mellow and melancholic while the Birds Part 1 plays over the radio. There's darkness all around except for what the lampposts on the stretch choose to highlight. It's some unaccounted hour past midnight, and the full moon stands high over dark waters like a lowercase I, burning white hot, while everything else cools in blackness. A vigilant custodian sitting on top of a very high chair, watching and recording all the independent sights, stories, and sounds of all the sins and vices in town. And before all those wicked, wicked souls are able to give that somber and forever stalking single eye in the sky to slip. "What's your name?" asked the Uber driver. "What's yours?" asked the woman back. It's the PCH, a suicidal road winding all along the banks of a Pacific coast, a long stretch of travel that is the Malibu Strip. The ride is doing something over 60 miles per hour, moving fast yet feeling as if hardly moving at all. Maybe just for the woman's senses, since her senses are disembodied right now and embodied someplace else. Ray finally lets out the Uber driver as she lets out nothing. A minute passes and now she's feeling a bit gracious. Jezebel, she now lets out. Now her eyes on him in the rear view mirror. Momentum builds while pupils lock, while precautions stray off with the wind being blown in and out of the car through the slit of the back passenger side window. "My name is Jezebel Singer," then eyes back out the window towards the nothingness outside. "Pretty name," he grins all tongue-in-cheek. "Is that your professional name?" "No, that's my real mom and dad given name." She nonchalants. "What do you do?" "I dance." "Do you also sing?" "No." And with the next question, Ray shows some tiger stripes and decides to pounce. "Then why don't you call yourself Jezebel Dancer?" And that almost gets Miss Singer going as her inhibitions begin to give way as she can't help but to grow a little receptive. Because. That would be silly, I guess, she guesses. "Well, you dance, don't sing. Name is Singer, just saying. It might give people in the city the wrong impression. I'm not changing my name to Jezebel Dancer just so people can know I'm a dancer, not a singer. Why not?" Ray dares. "No, stop, that's just so..." And now she can't help but to laugh a little. How's your singing voice?" Ray continues. Miss Singer now finds herself struggling to smile and speak at the same time. The vibes in the vehicle are feeling very whimsical and lightheaded as a cool trans-Pacific breeze flows in and cools the insides. Although there's also the vibes Ray's putting off. His vibes feeling warm and tasting sweet like fresh green Mediterranean grapes. Ray was bronzed for the summer and a bit of a receding hairline, which he kept fine and faded short, but that wasn't something Jezebel would find off-putting. He was wearing a white denim jacket which looked on fleek on him, but then again maybe a little too fleek and maybe a little too fleece. Uber driver or not, he seemed like he wanted to stand out or at least be more eye-grabbing than even his Uber clients. Best feature was his eyes, or at least what Jezebel could collect from what she saw reversed in the rear view mirror. "All I know, he's an attractive man," Singer thinks, admitting it to herself so the thought wouldn't later go on to rear-end her before it's given a chance. "My singing voice? I don't know," she blushes. "Sing for me." But with that, Singer now shakes her head. Sweet-tasting grapes or not, a sour part is starting to give a bad aftertaste. I'm kidding, Ray gives. Then sighs. Unmistakably, there's an attraction brewing inside the car, which both parties feel fully conscious of, yet Singer still holds reservations, not wanting to make eye contact again, at least not yet. Ray having eyes like a brooding Sagittarius and waiting, eyes that feel sharp, which also happen to feel maybe a little too sharp for her. "Where are you from?" he asks. "Tennessee," she answers. Usually something she willingly wouldn't, but with Ray she willingly does. "So how do you like it out here?" Singer hesitates. She could answer him how she'd answer anyone else that would ask that question. But since she's beginning to like him, she's unable to at the moment. "It's great," she could say. "There's so much to do and see out here," she could continue. Small talk. But really meaningless rhetoric she would give anybody. But that's the problem with rhetoric. It's something you'd say when you don't have anything to say, really. Neither do you want to. I don't know. I guess I like it. The moon now seems a bit aggravating for Singer. It's a big and beautiful moon, most definitely, but maybe a little too big and beautiful. And something big and beautiful in this part of the world seems to have a dislikable and disagreeable aesthetic about it, which is something Singer never got back east. You coming from a party in Malibu? Ray asks. You get that a lot? Singer asks back. What, picking up people from Malibu house parties? Yes, directs Singer. Well, yeah, I do. And other stuff will bring, says Ray. Tell me some stories, asks Singer. But now Ray seems not so eager to participate, though there's intrigue like a cat hidden under a sofa eyeing up at a caged canary. But when it comes to the stories coming from the PCH, much can be experienced while less can be explained. The PCH having that way about itself, a special characteristic onto itself. A beachside front where one can find Hawaiian pagan gods gracing the mainland coast with all their might and mischief. Stories, rubs Ray, also while rubbing the back of his neck in the flamenco position. Well, goes Singer. Well, there's nothing really coming to mind, to be honest. Mostly there's just a lot of weird stuff I get working out here. Especially just about every time I pick up pretty girls from Malibu. Can't really explain it. I can imagine, admits Singer, also aware that that was an indirect compliment towards her. Whatever the stories are, Ray has Singer in mind, and he's right to do so. With no stories being brought up by Ray, truth is none are needed. And now something monumental is asked. What are you doing out here? Concerns Ray. It's monumental because it comes from a caring place. Californians for Singer have mostly been a type of lot never to ask anything so intrusive. Californians being a very just treading lightly breed of people, they have their bubble, and to them the bubble is something sacred, and something strictly taboo for outsiders to breach. I want to dance, all that Singer's willing to let out. Does it mean that much to you? Yes. Ray now looks into the rear view mirror. Singer does the same. Although, blank stares are all that are mutually distributed. And although, even though Miss Singer is definitely an assertive girl by looks of it, right now she is being not so much giving an answer back. The ride continues now into Santa Monica, a city where LA people come to pretend not to be LA people. A quaint little coastal city that's really too big to be that, but like the inhabitants like to also pretend to be quaint and not overcapacitating its welcome. Ray continues to rub the back of his neck. Jezebel watches him do so. No other words are exchanged by the two for the rest of the trip, as Ray drives her back to where she currently holds residence somewhere in North Hollywood. Ray drives through Santa Monica on the 10 with all the pretty spectacles of people and places experienced only on the surface. Now cutting through the walled-off hills of the 405. Now into the escapes of the valley. Now eastbound. Now a bit more driving, and now here, her place. Lower middle-class condominium where Singer shares an apartment with three other women, somewhere just north of Universal Studios. Around Toluca Lake. All that driving, and depressingly enough, not another word is uttered, and not a single sentiment is addressed. And when so much was promised, and by the time Singer feels ready to say goodnight to Ray, Ray's already gone, off to tend to his next client. I'm never going to see him again. Thank you. I was worried something might come of that, Jezebel whispers to the air. After the night she's been having, she has had her fill of enough unwanted sexual thoughts going through her head. Last thing she needed was to meet someone she would actually feel willing to choose to satisfy them all with. And temptation she feared might choose to go against her better judgment and satisfy itself while taking Jesse along before the ride. Stop thinking about him, she whispers again, this time nothing to do with Ray. Miss Singer now eyes about the neighborhood. It's a nice area to live in, nice and gentrified enough for a girl like Singer not to feel it would be too sketchy for the likes of her and her taste. But that's the problem with gentrification. Her apartment complex really is a bit of a dump, leading her to live in a building that was built around the 1970s, which she now has to share to cover the rent, and with rent prices as if the building had been built at least sometime this century. She eyes it a little, her dump, her pad, but then a little around it, then catches the sight of Phil. Phil's a nice kid she once met some months ago at a Pete's Coffee and Tea. Nice beta black kid that tried hitting on her with all his depressing and direct beta tactics. Phil's sleeping in his Nissan Sentra, which is parked right on the same street as her building, forced to do so after being dropped by the local art college he was attending at, which he used to be housed by. Said he wanted to go into designing video games. Sad, really, just sad, but what can he do? He doesn't want to go back home to Kansas, but he has no job to be paying rent in a renter's market like this, so now he sleeps in his car. He uses the local 24-hour fitness location to do his toiletry. Jezebel has even caught him a few times at that gym sometime after 3 a.m. sleeping on a bench just outside the zone of the facility. No, shut up. Singer thinks now, as much as friend zoning the poor guy was hard, the last thing she needs now is to be badgered up by Pity to hit him up and take him in. Pity can be such a self-righteous jerk, especially with guilt-tripping moments like these. Singer decides to walk on now and head in through the gated structure, into the dingy elevator, up to the third floor. Now she's at her apartment door, apartment 302. Now inside. As Miss Singer looks about in the dark, and it's funny. The inside of the apartment just glows of NoHo as if she's still standing there outside in the corner of Magnolia and Lancashire. No, Phil, you wouldn't be getting much of an upgrade if I had you sleeping in here on the couch, she thinks, as she looks at the walls that have scum-covered finger marks all over them, especially just above the black leather couch. And on that wall there's a Patrick Nagall-like poster hung up of a raven-haired dame wearing a diamond necklace and nothing else. Coincidentally enough, practically a dead ringer for Jezebel Singer. Green eyes, milky skin, pixie-cut black hair and all. What being the chances, but of course, naked. Light streaming in the color of 5 o'clock shadow blue that's being cut up by the blinds of the southward window, making the poster seem somewhat like a woman's prison scene from a D-grade movie. That or of some Brian De Palma thriller where a perverted creep might be standing just outside the window, peering in, peeping at the pigskins of this damsel of the night, and not a fun thought, thinks Singer. Not wanting to entertain the voyeuristic possibilities, especially with her standing there now staring at a harloted reimagining of herself, one that would live up to the Jezebel name. I hate that poster, she thinks. I'm home, announces Singer, loud. I'm home, announces Singer, louder. Doing such since she has to, she just has to. Since living with roommates of the likes of Jennifer, Jessica, and Judy, it's better to let the girls know she's home, so there won't be any surprises. Singer's a gorgeous girl, and unfortunately enough, so are those three. Which means no matter how many times Jezebel has had to wipe up all the dirty finger marks that are cascade all over the apartment walls, just in a day or two more will soon pop up, which Jezebel will no longer feel keen to clean again. I give up, she had thought, after the 5th week of living here. How is it that I'm living in an apartment with 3 other girls with names that start with J, thinks Jezebel, wondering what such a premonition is supposed to say about her, considering the letter that her name also starts with, and therefore deep down dreading what might actually be meant. Good, they're not here, Jezebel thinks. However, there's enough tacky zebra and tiger and leopard stripe and spotted underwear lying about letting Miss Singer know they can't be too far off. Especially Judy, whom Jessie found as the more formidable one of the 3. The other 2 really just bland, and more bland. The only remarkable moments experienced from the Jessica-Jennifer combo was hearing them once explain how they would only date boys with a 6-pack. That was it. Really, those 2 were just vapid cases. Judy at least seemed to have more of a stronger sense of her own prowess and personality, so much that Judy Romero at least had a last name to Jess, not even remembering the other 2's. But the other 2 were far less harmful and more harmless. Jessie always found herself heated encounters with Judy the most, whom she also shared her room being roommates with. Judy really being Jessie's counterpart, Judy a midday blonde and Jessie a midnight hair-colored girl. At the moment, it didn't seem like any of the 3 were around. However, Jessie was sure she'd eventually have to deal with Judy or the 2 other skanks in the morning. Jezebel then headed to her room, undressed, headed into the shower, washed herself thoroughly, finished, then heads to her bed to call it a night. Although before bedtime, walks over to the blinds of her bedroom window and closes them shut immediately, and now goes to her bed to sleep. But then it starts again. Jezebel holds her throw rug tight with both hands under her chin and stares up at the Spanish lace ceiling, a geographical landscape of an undiscovered world just above her, her eyes lost in that drywall wilderness. She sees herself up there, upside down, unsure of where she is, how she got there, and how to escape and find anywhere else that would give her a semblance of home. Don't focus on it, don't, she presses herself, but she's already lost in its mindlessness. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, stop. However, she's already stuck. Since childhood, she would do this. All of a sudden, her mind would focus on her respiratory system, and once it did, she'd find herself stuck manually breathing, In her thoughts, she'd begin to contemplate over the greater scheme of things, how everything she experienced of reality was something she was either aware of or unaware of, like her breathing or blinking or anything she had no direct control of. It was something she would never have to preoccupy herself to do willingly, she just would. But with her breathing, once she'd focus in, anxiety from awareness of it would grip her, and she'd become terrified over the thought of what if one day, all of a sudden, it would stop. And once focused in, she'd find herself locked in having to laboriously breathe and breathe. Like if she was to stop, she would stop. And as she tried to escape it, tried to force it to go back to being done autonomously by her respiratory, without her efforts, she'd find herself unable. And she'd go on and on and on, sometimes doing it all night long until the rise of morning. Stop it, please. God, take over. Just take over. Please help. Let me sleep. Let me sleep and not have to spend another night dealing with this craziness. And then she did. She became unstuck as she felt her mind break away and felt her breathing fall in sync with the greater scheme of things. The greater scheme of things, she thought to herself. The greater,